Okay, can everybody see my screen? Just give me a minute, please.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Just give me a minute. There you go. Okay. All right, so we are going to get started quickly. Slides starting from the back, that's fine. So today I'm going to be taking you through data collection and extraction methods. So we are entering into the 8th week of the cohort, and we expect that by now all teams have, some of the data they are going to be, some of the papers that they are going to be reviewing, with the exception of teams that is, getting primary data. We also believe that by now you have your inclusion and exclusion criteria. So what is next for you is to plan how you're going to extract the data that you need. And it's not enough to just extract any kind of data. You need to extract the right data that is fitting into your methodology. The way a team that is conducting a systematic review and a team that is conducting narrative review, the way they would extract data from a particular article or study is very different. So that is the reason why this training is important. And when we had the council last week, we were thinking of probably maybe doing some sort of webinar and share it with you guys. But I decided that it will be better for us to, go through this hands-on, and everybody can ask any question that they have, and we would all discuss it here. So for today, we are going to be discussing something called the data extraction funnel, which I have dived into a little bit. And then the next one is we are going to be identifying steps in data extraction. What type of tools and data are we supposed to extract? What are the things that we should consider before extracting data? And we are going to be suggesting methods for us to collect data accurately and efficiently. And finally, there is a general layout of a data extraction sheet that I will be sharing with you guys. I have used it personally, so I can talk confidently about its effectiveness. So before we go into all of those, what exactly is data extraction? If you hear the word data extraction, is it different from data collection? So most of the times people tend to mix up these two terms, but it is quite different. So data collection could come from the aspect of you searching for your papers, you going on a database to search for your papers to decide which one fits into your inclusion and extraction criteria. But before you start data extraction, all the papers that you have to fit into your inclusion criteria. You do not get to the point that you start collecting data and you start removing some data. Though there are some cases where, maybe you just go through the abstract of a paper and you discover that maybe these people didn't do this thing enough, or maybe it's just a protocol paper and you do not want to include it in your study. You can remove them, but it should not be too much at that point in time. So all I'm just trying to explain is, let's say maybe you've collected 100 papers that fit into your inclusion criteria. The amount of paper that you would remove and say that they are not good enough should not be more than 5. But this would also depend on the data extraction tool that you're trying to use. Some tools come with an automatic way for you to be able to remove all of those papers. Some you would have to be the one to, come together with your team to decide, is this good enough or not? So data extraction it's a regimented approach to extracting data. That means it's a plan. You need to sit down with it. You need to decide what you want to collect or not. And whatever it is that you decide, especially in the case where you guys are working in teams, whatever it is that you decide, it has to be what everybody would follow. So your team lead cannot tell you, this is our data extraction plan, and another person will say, oh, this is how I want to collect my own. It will make that particular research invalid. So however you are collecting your data, it has to be the same way for everybody in your team. So that is the reason why you are planning you are having a data extraction plan. This is what we want to do. These are the type of papers we want to collect. These are the type of papers that we want to include. These are the data that we want to collect. These are the necessary information that we need. So there are different kind of ways that you can actually, do your data extraction. But for any data extraction tool that you're deciding to use, it would either come in like a form or a table. So I'm going to be getting into some of those examples very soon, but the form or table would only help you try to capture the data, what you need. You're going to fill it indirectly. Some progresses from form to table, while some you just have to, build the form, and then the tool will organize the table for you. So the next one is the amount and types of data you collect, as well as the number of collaborators who will be extracting it, is very, very important. We understand that this is a team research, but one person cannot be the one extracting all data, depending on even the amount of paper you have. Even if you have just 5 papers or you have 100 papers, you need to have at least 2 people that has to be working on your data extraction for your team. Personally, I would say everybody should work on the data extraction, because number one, you're working with time here, and it could be very, very time consuming for just 2 people to do for a team. So please try as much as possible to include everybody in your data collection process. And that is why it is a very, very crucial stage, because you cannot go wrong with this. So before you start using your data plan, your data extraction plan that you have, it's also important that you try to pilot it. So pilot it means you're testing it to see how good it is. Will it help you capture the necessary information that you need? Is it not leaving out any other information? So when you test it and you see that it is good enough, then you can now start talking to your team. This is what we are going to do. This is how we are going to do it. It has worked well like this. If there are any other parts of the tool that you're supposed to have that you did not have, your pilot study would help you know that. Your pilot process. So this is a data extraction funnel. I got this particular image from Confidence. It's one of the tools that we are going to be talking about. So when you get started with your data collection, you start by analyzing the title. So I believe that by now, everybody's inclusion criteria should not include papers that is not directly related to your topic. That's like the very first rule of inclusion criteria. Whatever paper that you're going to include has to be directly related to what you're doing. That's a no-brainer. So when you start with analyzing your title and your abstract, how good enough is the paper? Is it a protocol? What methodology did they use? If it's good enough for you, you go into full text review. And I'm going to get to that shortly. Full text review means that you are going to download all the papers that you feel are good enough for your inclusion criteria, that fit into your inclusion criteria. You download them, and each person that is reviewing your data, that is extracting your data, would read all the papers. Would read, let's say maybe your team has about 100 papers that fit into your inclusion criteria, and you decide that 5 of our team members are going to be working on the data extraction. You allocate 20 to each of them. So each person, they are going to read all 20 articles, full text, and make sure that they understood everything that is inside that particular paper. And that is when you can go into the data extraction stage. That is when you can start saying, this particular thing in this paper is good for us to include. This particular thing in this paper is good for us to include. But to maintain uniformity amongst everybody, that is the reason why you need that data extraction. But before you can get to the point of extracting data, you need to do your abstract screening, and you must have read your full text review. So what are steps in data extraction? So the first one is make sure you have collected the full text of any included articles, just like I said earlier. Whatever paper that you have in your inclusion criteria, create a folder and download everything. If there are some papers that you do not have access to, let us know. We'll find a way of, helping you with that. And if it's behind a paywall, we'll also see how we can sort that out. But make sure that whatever paper that you are including in your in your research, you are not just getting that information from the abstract only. It is very, very imperative for you to download all the full papers and read everything. That's why I said it would be better for you to allocate it to different groups and members of the group so that it will not be too time consuming for one person to do. So choose the pieces of information you want to collect from your study. So what are the most important things to pick out from your study? It is not every part of a paper that will be good enough for you or that will be useful enough for you. There are some papers that you just need one line out of everything that they did. There are some papers that you are just probably maybe using it to justify your own methodology. There are some that you only need it in somewhere in your introduction. And so many of them you will need when you're doing your discussion and every other maybe your discussion and maybe your results and all of those things. So, but whatever type of information or the amount of information that you're extracting from a paper, you need to make sure that you read everything fully. And that is when you would say that, oh, you've conducted an exhaustive research. That means there is no part of that particular study that you do not understand. But just like I said earlier, the importance of a data extraction plan is for everybody to know what exactly they would extract from one particular paper. So there is uniformity. And then the next thing is to create your data extraction template. Now, this is sort of a little bit generic because not all the tools that I'm going to introduce you now, state this exactly like data extraction template. It's because I'm a little bit biased with the one that I use the most. And, for some other people, they feel like, well, maybe that one is not good enough, or I wouldn't say it's not good enough. It's very, very good. I've used it a lot, but they'll feel like, oh, there are better options. And then the last thing is you need to review the data that you have collected for any errors. So that means after you have, extracted all of your data into whatever tool that you're using, some tools would help you remove all errors, and some you have to be the one to do it manually. So what data are you expected to collect from every paper? This is sort of subjective because it depends on the type of research that you're doing to start with. The type of data that you would need for a systematic review is different from a narrative review, or the type of information you need to extract is different from a systematic narrative or scoping review. For narrative and scoping, it might not be very, very different or obvious, but for all papers, there are some information that you cannot leave out. So talk about the author, the year of publication title, and the DOI number. Some of this, you cannot remove them because these are all of the things that would help you trace the paper back, just in case maybe you lost them or you want to, recheck them again. This is like a direct information for you to be able to look for the paper later. Then demographics of the population in the study. So what exactly are they trying to study? Is it like an RCT paper or a review itself? How many papers did they review? How many people did they, conduct research with? Is it a study? Is it like a study research, or was it a survey? These are like some of the information that you need to collect. Then for the methodology also, you need to understand what was the selection process, what was the participant recruitment process. Some other people would also mention that you should try to get information about how many years the data was collected, which is also very, very important because there are some studies that you would download and you would discover that they were probably maybe published. Maybe in your inclusion criteria, you mentioned that you are only collecting study that has been published in the last 10 years. And then you discover that there is a particular study that they started the research since about maybe 1990 something, and then they just finished it in 2017. So you all have to come together to decide if that paper will be relevant to you or not, because obviously some of the data that they have might be outdated. Then the last thing is the key findings. What exactly do you want to bring out from that data? What were their results? Was it quantitative or qualitative? Did they get any substantial quantifiable information in terms of numbers or percentage of impact if it's an intervention? And the qualitative means that what are the things that they arrived at when they were, doing that particular study. So these are some of the most common data extraction tools. I don't think there is any other one. Personally, I got so many of this information from the University of Washington and University of North Carolina. So the first one is Qualitrix. I believe we all know Qualitrix, right? It's a form software tool. You would create like a form to collect information and you can convert it into an Excel sheet later. I have not used this particular process to do like data extraction before, but I have used it for other projects such as like building a repository of information. And building a repository of information doesn't exactly mean that I will be analyzing data or I will be, checking out key findings. I'm probably just collecting information about, a particular media document. So, but I believe quality should be good as well, especially if you are able to, convert it into Excel sheets or Google Sheets or whatnot. Then the Word document, which I personally believe that might be the most stressful of all because you would have to like create a table and start putting all of that information there. So I believe it will just it still comes together to you creating a table and try to pull out the information. But because the Google document or Word document is not like a document that you can stretch very far. You would not be able to extract everything that you want to see or try to see all your information in one page. So I think it will be a little bit stressful to use. So those are my least favorites. Then we have the Cochrane Revman. It's a free tool that is used in Cochrane systematic reviews. It's very nice. And I'm going to like talk a little bit about that later. And we have confidence and the Excel sheets or Google Sheets. So I'll be talking about confidence first. It's just like I said earlier, it's a systematic review tool. What I love about the confidence tool is that you only need two people to do the data extraction. It could take a while for you to create the data extraction form because you have to create a form on it as well. You have to tell it what you want it to do for you. But by the time it's extracting the data, you would not have to stress. It will be the one to extract all of the data for you. And sometimes, if you know how to use it very well, it can also review the data for you. But the downside to it is that you need an institutional access to it. So if you are lucky enough to have two people in your team that have institutional access to Covidence, I would say use it, especially if you're doing a systematic review. It will be best for you. So if you need any more information, you can go to their website and learn about it. Another thing is, if you've never used it before, it can be daunting to get started with because it's a software. You need to know how perfectly it works to be able to use it. And the next one I will be talking about is the Cochrane Revman. It's a free software, so that is also good. It's very simple to use. Sincerely, I have never used it before, but I've seen the user interface and it looks like it's not something that will be very, very hard to use. But once again, it's important that you try to learn to use it before you go in and make sure that if all of you have agreed or decided to use it, that is what everybody on the team is using. So it has to be a team decision for you to decide which tool you will be selecting. So finally, my most favorite, some people could say stressful, but it's tested and trusted. And I love the fact that you can see all your mistakes, your do well and everything whatnot. You can see everything in one page. Everybody can have access to it. It's somewhat easy to use. And most importantly, it is free. So this is a particular template that I created for the purpose of this training. I have one that I'm using presently and I have over 200 papers on it. So it makes it very, very easy for me. If I need just, quick information for research for a paper or anything, I can easily just, go there and pick out anything and talk about it. So one thing that I'm going to do next is I'm going to try to open this sheet on Google itself and try to walk everybody through the process of using it. Okay, so there it is. I want to try and minimize this a little bit. Okay, so the first column, because it's not just one person that will be working on it, you need to have the name of the team member that is going to get started with each one of them. But the number of rows before you get to the next name of the team members will determine how many papers you have and how many of your team members are working on your data extraction. I strictly suggest once again that everybody should work on the data extraction, but it still depends on how many people you have on your team and how many people are smart enough or have used all of this thing enough to be sure that you're confident that they can actually use it very well. But before I go on, I know some people will have questions before I go into this practical part of the whole thing. So if you have any questions, please, you can can they speak up? Can they unmute and try to speak up?
Yeah, they can raise their hand and they can also use the chat. We have one question here saying they need the
Okay.
slides after the session.
The person said what?
They need the slides, that they would like
Of
to have
course,
the slides.
definitely. It's going to be part
Yeah.
of your resources for this week. So any questions before I go on? I know some people will have questions about some things that I mentioned before, and this is like the practical aspect. I don't want to mumble those questions together. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself and speak up. Okay. I'm going to continue now. So if you have any question later, you can always put it in the chat. Okay, so just like I said, this first column is for the name of the team member handling what amount of papers and also the study ID. Now, depending on how you are getting your
Dami, before you go on,
yeah,
somebody has a question and they
okay,
say, is there any limitation in article selection? I'm not clear on that though.
limitation in article selection, is it at the point of data extraction or um is that the point of data extraction or data collection? Like maybe you deciding that this is the paper that is good enough for us or not? Is that what the person is trying to say?
I'm not sure,
Because,
they did not align, but I think we can just, answer both.
yeah, if it's at the point of data collection, that is where your inclusion criteria comes in. If, for example, you are saying that we are only selecting paper that is from this year to this year, we are only selecting paper that is talking mainly on mental health, or maybe we are only selecting paper that is studies that are only conducted in Africa or, wherever, that is like your inclusion criteria. So that means that whatever it is that you have in your inclusion criteria, it has to be something that is decided on by everybody in the team, and it has to be something that makes sense, because at times I was recently on a particular research and we were trying to look for papers that were primary research that was conducted around the intersection of non-communicable diseases and climate change. But we also wanted a specific study population, which was pregnant women and children. When we started searching on PubMed, PubMed is one of the largest database that you can look for papers, like health-related papers. When we started searching, we noticed that there were very, very few. In fact, all the papers that we got that were randomized control trials for that particular topic, intersection of NCDs, climate change, and pregnant women, we were only getting maybe 5 or 3. We cannot include just 3 papers in a full study. So the person that I was working with decided that, oh, we have to start including reviews in our inclusion criteria. So we switched up the inclusion criteria a little bit for us to be able to have lots of papers. And lo and behold, we had access to over 100 papers. So your inclusion criteria will determine the amount of paper that you're going to have and the quality of the paper you're going to have at times, though you might not be able to determine the full quality until you read the full articles. So for your data extraction, the same rule goes. The only thing is just that what exactly are you extracting from your data? This data extraction template that I'm about to explain to you guys is not, I'm not saying that this is exactly what you guys to use. I'm just trying to say this is like a skeleton for what you guys can actually build on. no two research is the same. You guys might feel like, oh, there are some other information that you need to get that I exactly did not include here. So that will determine the type of, data that you want to extract from your study. So I hope I've answered your question. So I'm going to go on now. So
Also,
the
another question in the chat, if you have
okay.
time to just take that one.
I'm listening.
Yeah, so Japhet said, you spoke about having a uniform research pattern in our various teams and not deviating from it thereafter. What happens when you come across a paper that is found to be of great utility that wasn't captured yet but meets all inclusion criteria?
You have a paper what?
A paper of great utility that wasn't captured, like, before the old data extraction, and then maybe they found this after. So, like, what can you do with that?
So I think that's a very, very amazing question. And I think one of the things that is very, very important is for you to, that is why we mentioned earlier that you should have a data collection plan. How exactly do you want everybody to collect your data? If you are saying that you have an inclusion criteria, which is usually very, very important for systematic review, systematic review are much more rigorous than every other type of review. Because if you are saying these are the amount of papers that are found that is good enough to include into this paper, that means you have searched everywhere and you have seen that there is no other paper that talks about this particular topic that is good enough for us to include. You need to be able to justify that, and that's where you have your Prisma flow and all of those places, all of those things come in. But for every other kind of review, there is usually no, there is, but it is usually not as strict as systematic review for you to say, these are the papers that we found and there is no other one anywhere, and these are the ones that we are including. So the statement that they put on all of those type of studies could usually come like, we are including so amount of papers into our study. So depending on your kind of review, again, if you start with your data extraction and you find a paper and it fits into your inclusion criteria, I believe that you can still include it. And but what I would just advise is that before you start your data extraction, make sure that your data collection was exhaustive. That means you try to search as many databases as possible. Or if you have selected some major databases to search, you have exhausted that database to make sure that there is no other paper in that database that you found all the data all the papers in that database that fit into your inclusion criteria. I hope that person understood what I said. Is there any other question before I go on?
No, I think you can go on. And also timing.
Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, if there is any other question, let's just leave it till after. Okay. So we understand that it's not everybody that have access to all databases. There are some databases that are behind the paywall. So, but whatever database that each team member is working on, they should put the name of the database here. So that by the time we are done, you can say, oh, these are the amount of papers that we got from so database. These are all the databases that we got our paper from, in fact. Then you should have the citation of your paper here. Now, for citation, there are other parts attached to it, in the sense that if your team is using a citation tool, you do not exactly to put APA here. I've never written any paper with another citation before. So I'm a little bit biased with APA. It's what I use every time, and that's why you have APA here. But if your team is using a citation tool, you guys can decide that, oh, for the data extraction template, this is just the citation that we are using. When you are done and you want to like publish your paper and you start reading the journal guidelines that you have, you would have to decide, you would have to follow the journal guidelines. That means they're going to tell you, this is the citation type that we want to use. Maybe it's Chicago or Harvard or ASA or whatnot. Then you would have to convert all of your citation into that. If you If your team decides that, oh, we are using Chicago from the beginning too, that's okay. I am just putting this out there so that this is uniform for everybody. But if your team has a tool that you want to use, you can always try to incorporate your tool into the sheet if you can do that. I have never done that before, so I'm not in the best position to talk about how you can, incorporate your tool into this data extraction template. But my advice is go with just one citation type. Then when you're done and you read your journal guidelines, you can always convert everything later. Now, there's another thing that I think everybody should see. Everybody could know about it, but one of the things that we had in mind while planning this climate and health research lab is to make sure that every information that we are putting out there is very simple for everybody to understand. So I'm not just going to assume that everybody knows. I'm still going to talk about this. So this, what I'm referring to is using a Google Scholar button. So if you go on your Google, I don't know what it's called. Is it the, oh my God. I think it's a Google software store or something. You would be able to, there is a part where you will be able to add Google Scholar as part of your buttons on your Chrome. So anytime you open Chrome or you open any tab, you are going to see Google Scholar here. Once you've added it, you can pin it, you can, not want to pin it. But the reason why I usually love to have it here when I'm working with paper is because, take for example, this is the citation of this particular paper. If I copy it and if I just highlight it and I try to go on my Google Scholar buttons, it takes me exactly to where the paper is on that database. Now, this would work for you if you are trying to, if you already have all the paper that you want to work on, and you're just trying to like convert all, you're trying to put all the paper here, and maybe some of you are trying to download the paper, or you're trying to read more about the paper, or you're trying to see all other versions that the paper have, or you are trying to also copy the DOI. So it is very, very easy to use. You can easily go to the paper from here. If you click on all of this link, that's a direct PDF to that paper. Once you click on it, you can download the paper. If you want to cite it in another citation style, if you click on cite, you can see all of the other citation types. And if you are working with what's it called? A reference tool for your citation, you can easily add it to anyone here. I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with all of these ones, but if you're using a citation tool, that is what should be discussed as part of your team discussion and everything before you go on. So that is that for Google's lab button. I encourage that everybody should have it on their Chrome interface so that it's easy for you to get information to a paper swiftly. It will also give you information about the database that paper is from. But the most important thing that you need to understand is that whatever information that you're trying to select is you need to be very, very careful and try as much as possible not to make mistakes. That is why if everybody on the team is working on the paper, nobody feels overwhelmed. So let's say maybe each person has just 15 or 20 papers to review. It's easier for everybody. It doesn't stress anybody out. But what is important is that if you have chosen to work on the data extraction for your team, it has to be a rigorous process. And you have to make sure that you are not making any mistake whatsoever, because whatever information that you put on your data extraction template is what you are going to put in your paper eventually. You don't want to be the one to cause your paper to be denied. So please, if you are committing to it, make sure that you work on it perfectly well and you read all of those papers exhaustively and put the right information. So the next column is the DOI, the publication here, and the study location. If it's something that is, relevant to your study. If you have chosen a particular location to work on, let's say maybe it's Africa or Nigeria, or you've picked a particular country, there will be an exception to this, because what you are just going, in fact, I don't even think you will need this column. Because at that point in time, you know that in your inclusion criteria, all the papers that you're reviewing, nobody would go into any paper that is beyond that location. And then you need to talk about the target population for the study, what's their age, where they come from, what exactly are they doing there. Then the sample size, how many people were probably maybe surveyed, how many papers were included in that particular study, and then years of data collection. With my experience in collecting data, in doing data extraction, one thing that I have noticed, it's not subjective, but one thing that I've noticed over time is that papers that are usually RCTs or, primary research, they are usually the ones that have years of data collection. Most, I don't know exactly why, but most publishers rarely put years of data collection for review papers. But if you have a randomized control trial as the methodology of the paper that you are checking on, usually there will be somewhere where they include information about years of data collection. So if you have that information, put it here. If it's not there, you can just put not present or not stated or any language that your team agrees on. And then the next thing is study design. That's the methodology. What exactly did they use? Some studies will have, two study designs combined together. I wonder how stressful that would be anyway, but I've seen papers like that before. Another thing that you would see is there are some papers that are interventions or conference papers or commentaries. If it is any one of those, also included there. Now, to the specific variables and climate and environmental factors that's related to your research, we are doing a research at the intersection of climate change and health. So whatever it is that you're working on must have a climate or environmental factor that is indicated in that paper. I think this is a no-brainer for everybody. So let's say maybe your team is working on probably maybe air pollution or whatever. Maybe you're working on how air pollution is affecting people in Nigeria or maybe in another country or whatever. If there are any other type of variables that is directly related to maybe air pollution or whatever, those are the ones that you're not going to put here. It could also be maybe the health outcome of that particular climate or environmental factor. So maybe you're working on how climate change affects the health of children. So you could say if that paper is narrowing down on the specific health outcome on the population, you can put it here. Now, I understand that there are some teams that would have, a variable that will have like another category, maybe like technology or whatever, if their team is working on that. So for all the papers that they will be reviewing, they would see some of them make reference to some type of technology or some advancement or whatever that is specific to different countries. So this is like a skeleton. You guys can always work on it together and decide what you want to bring out or not. Now, for these key findings, most times the information that you get from key findings are usually gotten from the discussion and the results. So what exactly did they find in that primary research or review paper? What did they suggest? And this last column is for you to see if there are other papers. Now, for the person that asked question about deciding what, like if you started your data collection, your data extraction, and you discover that there is another paper that fits into your inclusion criteria. Most of the times, this is usually where you find all of those papers. But you have to be very, very careful because there are some paper that would have like almost the same title, but the difference would come in the methodology. So if you are doing anything like that, you have to make sure that you have read that paper to T to see that it actually fits into your research. You don't just see two papers that looks like, oh, they are the same, or they have like the same methodology, or they have the same results and try to like include it because it looks like that. And whatever it is that you do, know that you're not making decision alone. Always reach out back to your team to say, oh, I have issues about this paper. That's another reason why why I think this Excel sheet is good. Because if you have any issue with another paper, you guys can, have a discussion about flagging out a paper that you have issues with. You can color code it. You can just come here. Let's say you have issues with this particular paper. You're not sure with it, whatnot. You can just give it a color. So when they see that particular color, everybody knows that, this person has issues with this paper, and then they will ask question and you guys can resolve it and make a decision about it. So whatever decision you're making, whatever it is that you're deciding, it is not just for you alone. It has to be a collective decision with your team, and it has to fit into the purpose of your paper. So with that, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. If anybody has questions now, questions now now is the time to ask your question away. Yeah, IMD, you can take over. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dami. That was very insightful. As always, I still keep taking notes when I, learn from you and other speakers that we have during this session. Yeah, so I also want to mention Zotero is also a good referencing software. Let me just type that down in the chat. My team used that last time and it was really helpful. Yeah. So if anyone also wants to check out that referencing software. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you very much, Dami, for ending this session. It was very insightful and I've learned a lot. So yeah, it's open now for questions. If anybody have any questions that you want to ask, you can always type in the chat or unmute yourself. And then, okay, we have a question in the chat. Raphael says, for a systematic review, can we include review articles in data collection?
Okay, I'm laughing at this particular question because I remember that I had this question the very first time I was going to do something like a systematic review. And I had someone tell me, no, you cannot include a review in a review. And I've been working with a particular research company now. And, this is someone that has over 25 years of experience in research. And when we started the review, she said, we can include reviews. And I was like, I thought they said you cannot include a review in a review. Sincerely, I believe that there are ethics, there are rules to some things that you have to do in research, but there are some information that there are some decisions that are sort of, it has to be collective for everybody to decide that, oh, it is good enough, or this is what we want to do. And I think this is one of those things. Personally, I don't think I would want to include a review in a systematic review. Because one thing that I have noticed in reading papers for so many years is that when you have when people are reviewing a paper, papers, and they are trying to turn it into a paper, you are sort of collecting information, like key information from different type of papers and including it, you are putting it together to make a review, to make one statement for either policy, what's it called, and usually I think that comes with policy advancement or whatnot, because when you get information from different areas, let's say maybe you're trying to talk about how climate change is affecting people's health in, let's say, maybe Pakistan. For a review, for that particular topic, you would be talking about how climate change affects maybe different populations. You will be mentioning how it's affecting different populations. What are the different type of ways it's affecting different populations? Is it economically or, socially, and all of those things? So that's like a review. You're now making a statement for all the papers, all the primary research that has been done. So if you ask me personally, I would say that for a systematic review, I think it's best to have primary research on it. But for every other kind of reviews, there are some information from some reviews that you will still pick that are relevant enough to what you want to talk about. But where the disconnect comes from me is that a primary research usually have like a causal relationship and a definitive statement in their findings. For reviews, they would have to say, this person said this person said this, so that means this is this. At times, the language could progress and disintegrate along the line. And to me, at times, it doesn't make sense anymore. So whatever it is that you want to do as a team, make that decision collectively. But as for me and my household, I don't think I would want to include reviews and systematic reviews. If you want to do that, that's okay.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And that just really highlights how, even though research is very scientific and there are a lot of guidelines, there are still a lot of personal, experience and insights that people still include in their research, basically.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that comes from that. So
Yeah.
so Raphael also asks, what is the minimum number of articles required for a systematic review?
Wow, that's a very experiential question. And I say experiential because you could get started with seeing 1 million papers that fit your research. And then as you continue to break it down and include it into your inclusion criteria, you would see that this is why this one is relevant, maybe because of the years. And but I believe that the final, stage that you decide if this paper is good enough or we want to include it is when it comes to the results. How good? I mean, what's the quality of the paper? But to the number of articles that is required, I don't think there is a cap on it. But I don't think I've seen any systematic review that has up to 1,000 papers included, unless it's a report, and which is totally different. That is something that they do for so many amount of years. I've seen systematic review that included just 15 papers. So it depends on the topic, because your topic will also determine how many papers you're going to see. That is why it's important that you do not just have a generic topic. You have a topic that is streamlined enough for you to be able to get key information and direct information. And you're not just, squirming through papers to get the information that you need.
Thank you, Dami. Okay, Olympus has his hand raised. And then we have one last question in the chat. So I think we'll just take these two questions and then
Okay.
We would close up for today. So Elias says in the chat, is he allowed to undertake a meta review because our topic is connected to quantitative data?
Yes, you can do that. You can do that. As long as you have someone that sort of have experience in it, or if it's something that you can all do as a team, I think you should. It would really be nice to have, a quantitative finding. And if you need help, please at any point reach out to us. We are willing to help you with that.
Yeah, definitely. So Olympus, you can unmute now and ask your question. And for any other questions that we have, you can always drop it in the main chat and then we'll attend to it, or send an email and we'll also attend to your questions. Yeah, so Olympus, over to you. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Dami. Is that the name? All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
that is.
Thanks so much for your insightful presentation. And my question, I don't know whether it sounds maybe I don't know whether it sounds like I've not been in this space for long. Maybe it sounds naive, but let me just ask anyway. In starting, right, and doing all of the data collection, the search strategy and all that, there's a lot of focus on what's supposed to really like form the result of the study, right? That's what the paper is really about, if we are using like scoping review, systematic review and all that. So at some point, then you realize that there's a lot of paper. How do you, that are also relevant? So maybe I want you to answer this experientially, right? How do you identify those papers that are generally good for the body of your work, but not necessarily for the results that you want to analyze? They are great in terms of influencing your introduction, a lot of your the introductory aspect of your work, basically, which is actually a very major aspect. Because if you look at the result and discussion, they are like just about 30% of the entire work. Usually it's the introduction that takes a lot of the work. So we understand that a lot of these papers are going to form a huge part of your introduction, your conversation, right? Before you get to what results means like. So how do you personally handle the level of scrutiny that should be introduced to be able to really, really trickle down to the most relevant things for results? Now, not necessarily for framing your research.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much for that question. It's your question is sort of It's one in whole. Let me put it that way, for lack of a better word. So the thing is, research is progressive, and there are some reviews that you will do, and you are making reference to, you are categorizing your findings. So let's say maybe we are talking generally about the impact of climate change on health. You would expect that that particular paper would have specific topics, specific impacts on how climate change is affecting health. If the title of the topic is how climate change is affecting the health of pregnant women, you would expect to see specific outcomes of how climate change is affecting pregnant women, either directly or indirectly. If you're talking, even the paper that talks about how climate change is affecting health, some people could decide that, oh, we are going through the direct and indirect pathways, and that is what you will see as like subtopics in their research. So for your results, for the papers that will determine what you're going to put in your results, I believe that there would be papers that are directly committing to your research methodology. So if, for example, your research is the effect of climate change on the health of pregnant women in Africa, you know that you are going to have a paper that talks about the effect of climate change on health generally. You're going to have papers that talk about the effect of climate change on the health of pregnant women. You're going to have papers that has the effect of climate change on people's health in Africa. If you are lucky enough, you can find another paper that will talk directly about different pregnancy outcomes that could be influenced by climate change in Africa. Some will not go into the detailed outcomes. Some will talk about it generally. Some will go into pretty minute details. If I come across, if I get to a stage where I'm in a dilemma with the question that you ask, I think what I will probably do at that point is, some paper will have more details than the others. The papers that would help me decide what I want to bring up from a paper, and that is, from my study, and that is why having your research question is important. So your research question is what is going to lead you down to, combining your discussion and results and all of that. And most of the time, when you're trying to synthesize your results in system or even any type of review, what you are doing is trying to bring together information of different studies that have said one thing in particular. So that is when you start seeing 5 studies or 6 studies out of our research discover that this is that, this and this and this. But what can actually help you directly is if you sort of maybe have like subtopics of different variables that you're trying to measure. So let's say maybe you're working on the climate change and pregnancy outcomes. Now, what are the general health outcomes that pregnant women have? Are there papers that work directly on each one of those outcomes from the beginning to the end? That would automatically help you categorize your paper. Now, for the introduction that you mentioned, there are some papers that would just give you general information about, they'll probably just give you direct information that, oh, climate change has been established to affect the health of pregnant women. And that is where you are going to start from, because you are willing to go into more details. But this will also depend on location, the variables that you want to explore, and also your research methodology. So it depends on how detailed and how focused the study you are trying to explore is, will determine, if this is going to fit into your introduction or if it's going to fit into your discussion and your results. Do you understand what I said? Have I answered your question the way you want it to be answered?
Very well, very well. Thank you so much for that. Like the fact that you said the research question is really going to be instrumental in that, in deciding what. And you know that these questions is the reason why I asked is because if it's individual research, people could easily do anyhow, right? But because it's a team research, I wanted to hear from you so that during team meetings, people can be able to make reference to a kind of the same line of thought and say, okay, these were things that we discussed during, and let us have a common approach
Mhm.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much for that question. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you both, and super, super appreciating Dami, for your for your teaching. It's so
Thank you.
easy to see you as like the CEO and behind the scenes, but then hearing you talk and training us, I think that's been really helpful to everyone on the call. If
Thank
I
you
do
so
say so.
much, Aya.
Yeah. So we are running out of time now, and we can't take any more questions. But right about now, I'm going to start our feedback poll. So we'd just like to get feedback on what you think about the session so far.
Okay.
I think it should be on your screen now.
It's
Okay,
not
you
yet
can
on
go
the
ahead.
screen, but yeah, before you go on, I wanted to say that once we close out the meetings, the second round of application that we conducted, if you know that you are part of that second round, please stay back. We would love to have some, like just a little bit of time with you guys. So if you are okay with that, please stay back after the meeting. Yeah, I am there. You can go on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so the poll should have popped up now. I can see people are beginning to respond to the questions. So we'd just like to get your feedback basically on, this session. So that will also inform further sessions. And like Dami said earlier, this is week 8 and we are going into week 9. Next week, we are not having a training session. Next week is more for individual team meetings. So that will be communicated on the group. And then our next session will be week 11, and that will be May 11th. We'll definitely share you reminders on via email and all of that basically. So I'm just saying that right now. Yeah, so I just like to get more people, share their feedback. Only few people have participated. If you cannot see the poll pop up on your screen, you can just go down or look down at the bottom of your screen. You see 3 dots that says more if you're using a system, or just 3 dots, and you click on that and you see polls. And when you click on polls, the pop-up should come up on your screen basically. So we just like to know, I think we just have about 5 questions. We just want to get your feedback on the session so far. And of course, you can also share feedback with us directly on the group chat or via email, whatever you want to share. We are always open to answering your questions, and the team is here to serve you. Yeah. Okay, I can see most of the people on the call are already taking the feedback. Thank you all. Yes, definitely you'll be receiving the slides that will come in the Monday email, resources from this week, the slides and other resources. So you can always go back to it basically. And yes, I really want to appreciate you all for joining this session. We didn't plan to have a session today, but because of the session that we canceled last week, we decided to just have this day. So, and it came pretty short. So we are really grateful for you all that have joined this session today and taking your time to be part of this and learning, and even being active on your teams and working, together with other people. It can be so fun. And yeah, last year was very it was a new experience for me, and I really loved it. And I'm sure all of you are also experiencing something similar in your team. So yeah, we are really grateful for you all for taking the time to join. If you've taken the poll question, you can definitely drop off. We are leaving the session open for people who just joined the new cohorts basically. So if you have been part of the old cohorts and have taken your introductions and all